Okay, hello everyone, and welcome back to What's Your Decision, my custom chess position that I have created. This is, I think, the sixth video in this series on What's Your Decision. So we first started with an introduction, and then we went over different opening lines. This is going to be the second opening video on the variation with 1e3. So I recommend that if you haven't watched the ones before this, please go back and watch those, as this is actually a continuation of the last video on 1e3. So just a quick recap. The idea behind 1e3 is that after the main line with c5, we go. So I'll just show some moves. What we're trying to do is we're trying to bring in the rook basically to. We develop the bishop this way, and we bring the rook to d1, d3, and try to take on c3 as white. So in the last video, we covered various variations in the main line. Remember that f5 here needed to be played to prevent bishop e5 and then being able to take on f6. That's a key. Key plan in this position. And we covered basically the opening, and we went over why knight f3 is probably a more forcing variation than f3 over here, and we went over why white cannot take over here, because if e takes d4, c takes d4, knight takes, rook takes, and then this bishop e5 move, and this pawn is pinned. So we went over all that last video, and now so after this main line, we arrived at this move after knight a c7 and knight e5. So so this is the main line of this opening. Also in last video, if I go back a few moves, we looked at bishop b5 lines, but in this video we're going to continue on this main line over here, and we're going to look at the move knight e5. So in this position, black has prevented white from being able to take on c3. And so in this position, white has a bit less control over the center because white played e3 instead of the move like e4. So they have a bit less control over the center. And so white's going to try to compensate by this by getting some active piece play, which is why knight f3 was played before. So knight f3 was a key move because now we can play knight e5. So just one clarification over here is we still cannot take on d4. For example, the line over here, e takes d4, c takes d4, knight takes d4, and after knight d5, which is a really good move because it's defending against c3, and it's also at the same time attacking f6, threatening to free black's queen and bishop. So knight d5 is a really good move. We play knight f3 over here. Yeah, we basically play knight f3 over here. Let me just see. Yeah, and bishop f3. Yeah, but then after this one we run into bishop takes f4 here, and black should be better because black is threatening to take on g5 over here. Which is actually, now I remember why knight f3 was the move played over here, was because after takes we have another defender over g5, but black is still going to sacrifice over here and take on f6 eventually. So this is certainly not the greatest. See, as the computer looks like in these positions, the computer is not the greatest guide as to what's the best move. But see, as the computer here is thinking more, it is agreeing with me that black is better over here. So the only move to continue from this position is the main line with knight e5. So knight e5 moves the knight to a centralized square, and it's also threatening to go to c4. And then once this rook moves somewhere, maybe here the bishop is also attacking over here, so black has to be careful not to be mated. And over here, the only move that black has is b5. So that's the move. So after b5, f3 is played to increase the attack on the d4 square. Because if white takes over on the d4 square, and they sacrifice a piece, they still have ideas to play rook takes c3 some point in the future as well. If the rook moves, they could even have some, even though there's a pawn on b5, the knight could get in, like they could control the light squares here very well. So knight d5 is played. Again, that's a really strong move as it attacks f6 and defends c3. Over here we play knight g4, which we're defending the f6 pawn. And bishop d7 is played, which is just a developing move, but also in the future, let's say white, like if white did nothing, black could move the knight back and then take on g4, and then after white recaptures, the defender of this f6 pawn is gone for white, so this pawn is weak, and then black can just scoop it up with knight takes f6 and free the queen and bishop. So that's the idea behind bishop d7. And just showing over here, so black has a move over here that instead of bishop d7, if they actually take on e3, which would weaken their control over c3. However, the knight is also defending over here, so black could play this as well. The king goes back, bishop goes to c1, which is interesting. Bishop wants to basically take over here, and if black takes, then rook takes c3, knight takes, and the queen is out, and then the bishop. But more than likely, black's not going to take, so the bishop's going to take over here. Black's going to do nothing. The bishop's going to go back, and then white's going to try to play like something like a3 and a takes b4 to try and slowly free their queen. Bishop d7 now. Bishop takes a3, b takes a3. Over here, if we played rook takes c3, which looks like the move that we would play over here, knight d takes, let's see, I wonder if it just bishop takes f4, and yeah, white is black is going to be able to win these pieces first. So let's say rook c d3, bishop takes g5 check, or we have g3, knight f4, and the bishop's gonna take on g4. Then black's gonna be able to take on f6 over here. So I have the line as rook takes d5, and the queen gets out this way. However, after b4, queen d2, and d4, so white got their queen out, but black is better. White's control over f6 is not that strong. They have this knight over here as well as the pawn, but the bishop is going to eventually take after this knight moves, as well as black's got some very strong pawns over here. So white can't really get in as well to the position, and if white wants to free like this bishop and b1, then once they play something like here, even the pawn b takes, and this and black will have 3 strong pawns over here, so black should be better in this position. But I think so actually, one second. D takes c3. Let's go follow the main line. I mean, you said black should be better, but now that I'm thinking about it, yeah, white actually has, because in my notes I think I had that this was a variable for both sides, because white has knight hf2, and so white can bring a knight to e4 and have like another protector over this f6 square. So actually, white has got their freed their pieces, but this f6 pawn, black's not going to be able to free it so easily. So this is actually very playable for both sides. This is very and in this e3, there's e3 variation. There's several like variations where white is able to free their queen and bishop, but it's playable for both sides. And yeah, I didn't realize, so white does have another defense over the f6 pawn. So even if black were to take on g4, well, white still has this defender with the g5 pawn, and now if they bring a knight to e4, I mean, it's going to be very hard for black to free the queen. So I think it's very playable for both sides. So bishop d7 is the main line within this main line, and d takes e3 is a playable move, but it's not necessarily, it doesn't have to be played. Bishop d7 is also a move over here. So knight hf2. Now let's look. Instead of that, white can try e takes d4, but I think this move I have in my notes is losing, so I'll show you the variation. Black takes the knight. So actually this is interesting. So white sacrifices, and they're going to try to capture on c3 eventually. Black takes on g4, so now the knight's starting to take on f6, so white has to actually sacrifice the exchange so that black cannot free their pieces. Rook takes d5, rook takes d5, c takes d5, f takes g4, so there's a whole bunch of exchanges. Once the exchanges are done, black should just be winning because black should just win this game. Let me see. So here, rook e8, and if the bishop, let's say, goes to f3, we have rook e6 is gonna win the is gonna free the queen. Yeah, black's first to free the queen, and I mean white can maybe try like something like just ignoring the bishop and then trying to free their queen and their queen for, oh, they can anyways. d4, yeah, d4 just protects this, and white is lost. And even if black doesn't like right away, they don't try to win it right away. White can never really, like, once white plays knight d1, then d4 is just coming in and white won't free the pieces. So yeah, black is winning in this position. So we don't take, we play knight f2 and bishop c7. So actually, this is a very interesting point in the theory of this position, because when I was first like analyzing this, I spent quite a lot of time on this position, and what I found was that black only had one move in this position that wasn't losing, which looks really surprising because there's a lot of pieces on the board, the position's kind of closed and everything, and bishop c7 doesn't seem to accomplish much. But let me show you the alternative moves, which are more natural, however. They're more natural, however, white will be winning. So we have the other move that can be played, d takes c3, which is a move that we saw before, but let's look at it again with a few moves later. So over here, we don't want to play knight takes e3 because black's going to free their queen and bishop, so we have to be wary of that. So knight e4 is played, just reinforcing this f6 square. And we got to note in some positions like this f5 square becomes very weak for white. Like if a knight gets into this f5 square, it's a smothered mate, so we have to be careful. So yeah, knight d4 is aiming to do that smothered mate on f5. So in this position, we don't really have any good defense other than to just take the knight. So we play rook takes d4, c takes d4, and rook takes d4. Bishop takes g4, h takes g4. Now black can maybe win, like sacrifice on f6 again at some point. Rook f e8. Perhaps there's like ideas of taking over here, and then after like f takes, then knight takes. Well, at this point, this rook would be hanging. It would be an interesting thing to calculate, but there's ideas like that. So we have, oh yeah, rook takes d5. So rook takes d5 stops that because it's exchange sacrifice, and also white's going to take on c3. So yeah, so I forgot. So while black has ideas to sacrifice on e4 and then take on f6 potentially, white has faster ideas. They'll take on d5 first. So d5, and of course, if rook takes e4 over here, then this rook over here is just hanging. So black will take back, and then once they take back, white gets off the sacrifice. They get the queen out, the bishop check, b4 is played. And from this position, actually, I did a bit more analyzing. obviously you want to use like the human sort of aspect, not just around like computer evaluations. Computer often evaluates these wrong. Like for example, over here the computer is saying that black is essentially winning, but computer doesn't understand the trap nature of these pieces for black, and they're not really in the game. So as we've seen in previous videos, I'm going to do my material counting for this position, and we're not going to count these pawns and these trap pieces because they're frozen. We're not going to count white's pawns over here because they're not going to really break through while black's pieces are trapped, at least not for the most part. Maybe in some endgames they can, but not here. And now counting the rest of the material, we can count for white. White has 9, 12, 15, 18, 19, 20, 21 points of material. Black has 5, 10, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19 points of material. So in our updated sort of material counting way, we have white being up 2 points of material, but I kind of went through some of the mainline engine variations to show that white is actually white should be winning better in this position. So just going to go through them quickly. I just went through some top moves. I just went so we played some moves, and actually the computer black in this position, the computer allowed like black to sacrifice on f6. So now actually black's getting out their pieces. You think black might be better now because they just be up material if they're freeing these pieces in the corner. However, in this engine line, after all these taking, we're up 1 point of material now if we count all the material on the board because there's nothing trapped anymore. However, we have a big initiative, and this black king is much weaker than the white king, which is actually quite safe on h3. And white's bishops are very deadly, and so queen d8 was the move over here. And see, now in this position, so actually here a note for this custom position is that when all the pieces are freed, so right, like in this position there's no trap pieces, so even if I was counting all the material, I would count everything on the board now. Computer is better at evaluating these types of positions when there's no trapped pieces going on. And yeah, in my notes here, it's even material actually here, but the computer thinks white should be winning due to initiative. And certainly we look at white's queen and bishops are very, very strong. Black has the queen and rook that are they're not able to attack white's king, so white will be the only side attacking right now. Black will take a couple moves to get their bishop in. In any sort of endgame, I think white has more promotion chances due to this pawn majority. 6 to 7 pawns to 3 over here. Black's pawns are kind of stopped on this side of the board, so yeah, white should be winning this position. So if we go all the way back, there's just some very long variation I looked into, and basically we had white being able to take on d5 and force the freeing of their queen and bishop, which would win them the game. And all of this stems from yeah, so bishop c7 was the only move I found that was playable, like not losing for black. So the move that we looked at was e takes d4 as another alternative, and that we saw that after a very long time, black was losing. So if we look at this position, because the move the only other move I'm going to be looking at right now is bishop c7, which is the main move. If you look, there isn't really much that black can do right now. So if we look at this d5 knight, it's kind of optimally placed because we want to be able to take on f6 eventually and defends c3. We could maybe move this e6 knight somewhere to try and like take over here. But even if you were to take on g4, then white has another knight to go over here. And we probably don't want to move this knight like backwards. You can imagine also the knight is coming to e4, so taking on g4 to be able to win f6. If there's now a knight coming to e4, that knight is going to be also protecting f6. So black doesn't really have many useful ideas. They might just like play rook to e8, but that doesn't really accomplish something. Bishop c7, which is the move I have over here, actually, you might think this doesn't accomplish anything either. However, this bishop is actually going to be coming to b6 in many lines, and this c3 pawn is going to be defended that way. And that's going to be the point of this move. So you might think, okay, we can defend this c5 pawn through b6. However, this king becomes trapped, and after knight moves, eventually this king could be cut off and could be checkmated in a position like this. And so I found bishop c7 to be a better move. And yeah, the reason why this c4 pawn could become weak is because a knight could get to e4, for example, take on here, then like a pawn could take on e4 and white's center could become crushed, then white could be able to take on c3 and dominate the game. So bishop c7 is played, knight e4, and bishop b6. So the idea is to protect the pawn with the bishop, and actually just like playing b6, the black's king is going to be trapped actually, but the difference is that this bishop b6 move is a more active move, and because white's going to be playing like in this to take in the center and then take on c3, this bishop is adding another like defender to the center, whereas a pawn on b6 would only be defending c5 and not also d4. So actually I have notes on this b6 move. So instead, if black goes for b6 instead of bishop b6, e takes, c takes, bishop takes d4, knight takes d4, rook takes d4, bishop takes, and after like a move like rook f e8, rook takes b4 actually wins this game, because if king takes, for example, then we're just going to play rook takes d4. Oh, even the computer, yeah, actually the computer likes this, and then we go for b4 check, king a4, queen takes c3, and there's nothing that can stop queen b3 mate. So if we go back some moves over here, we're able to get to d4, and there's no bishop that could take on d4. So yeah, bishop b6 is the move over here. E takes d4 is played. Now, there's quite some analysis I have on the move knight d6. So yeah, this is another big branching moment. So e takes b4 I have here, e takes d4 I have here as the main line. However, we're going to look at first at knight d6, which is a very interesting move. So knight d6, first of all, it just threatens knight takes b7 mate. Yeah, just threatens knight takes b7 mate, and also has some ideas to go to maybe c4 in the future. Remember, this bishop is indirectly attacking this diagonal as well. This knight on g4 could maybe come here and here as well, so this king is going to be weak. So knight d6, the line over here is bishop c8 defending. And actually, interesting enough, why in this variation with knight d6, white actually has a forced draw over here. So let's say if white doesn't want to play this position for a win, show you that line first. White can actually just draw the game, and it's interesting because of how many pieces are on the board and how weird this position is. Even though this is like a tactic for perpetual check and doesn't involve like freeing of any pieces, the computer thinks knight c4 check, which is the drawing line, it thinks it's -5 right now, which is interesting because this is not even like due to trap pieces that you would say. The computer might have valued it wrong. This is just a tactic. So let's show knight takes c4 check, b takes c4, knight e5. So you see we sacrifice the knight, but another knight is coming to take on c4, as well as the rook's going to move somewhere, and then the bishop is going to attack. So it's very threatening. Oh yeah, see now the computer sees it's a this still thinks c takes d3 is winning for black, but let's see. Bishop takes d3. I think that's the only move over here. So actually we have king b5. So instead of taking on d3, if black tries to defend with king b5, we have knight takes c4 over here. Bishop a5 is a move, e takes d4. You can just see that in this position. Oh wow. Knight e takes f4. So now it's showing that white is better. Let's see. G takes rook takes e2. So yeah, that was really important idea, was that basically to play rook e8 because we needed to get rid of this e2 bishop, because otherwise the e2 bishop would eventually checkmate the king on b5. It can't move because of this pawn over here, and this bishop defends this pawn. This king is going to be extremely weak and going to get mated. So rook takes e2 ideas were needed to be played. Now we have rook takes c3, which looks like it loses to it looks like it just loses to knight takes c3. However, rook's a line like this: rook takes, bishop takes. It's a wow. Okay, this is a maiden 6, king a5, knight c4. It's this sort of tactic: b takes, queen takes, a5, queen. Oh, did I mess something up over here? Oh, queen takes c3. Queen takes c3 over here. A5, knight d6 check, king a6, and queen c4 check. b5, c takes b6 is mate. Wow, that's a beautiful checkmate. So yeah, white actually wins if black plays over here. If black plays king b5, um, so black has to take on d3, and this is going to be a draw. So now white has just sacrificed a knight and a rook, but after bishop takes d3, you might want to just play the check first, knight c4 check, but after king b5, and now you take bishop takes d3, bishop a5, and if this knight, anywhere this knight moves, and the king's going to go to b6 if this knight moves. So that's why in this position, we take bishop takes d3, which is not even like a check or anything, but there's nothing black can do to stop perpetual. So for example, c4, um, and yeah, this is just going to be a perpetual check. And if the king ever goes to c5, which you might think that, oh, the king can escape, this is actually knight e4 is mate. So this is the perpetual check. So just going back a few moves. So it was this move with knight d6, bishop c8, and if white wants a draw over here, if white just doesn't want to play, white has a forced draw with knight c4 check. I'm just showing it's quite a beautiful draw, but yeah, white has that. So now going back a bunch of moves. Okay, so it's a lot of theory, and it's really, really exciting. So after knight d6, bishop c8. Okay, so let's say white wants to not just go for a draw here. Let's say white likes their chances and wants to win. They can play over here, knight takes c8, rook takes c8, e4. So e4 is going to push this knight away. Knight dc7, bishop f2, knight e8, bishop e1, rook d8, rook takes c3, d takes c3, bishop takes, rook takes d1, bishop takes, queen a1. So if we go back all these moves and we look at what was sacrificed, basically in this position, I mean, white can try to play this without sacrificing on c3, but if you just look at the piece placement, I tend to like black's pieces and their space better in this position. And also, I think that in this I think in this position, I tend to like black a bit better, but white doesn't have to do any sort of sacrifice. I think actually because this pawns on b, like these pawns, like eventually a pawn could go to c4 or something like that. This knight is going to be a good knight. This bishop might look awkwardly placed, but it's like defending over here. This rook is good. This knight can become good. If white's not sacrificing, white's pieces over here, and this rook is kind of misplaced if not sacrificing. So if white sacrifice, they give up a rook. They give up a rook and a bishop to free their queen. After b4, queen a1. Computer says black is winning here. I'm not so sure. I mean, I have in my notes over here computer says black is better. Let me just count some material. So 9, 12, 15, 18, 19, 20, 21. We have 5, 8, 11, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21. So we see actually over here is that using our system for counting material is completely even. However, in this position, black's king is seemingly decently safe. In these types of positions, black can always have ideas to sacrifice on f6, as well as this dark squared bishop can drop back. The rook can come in. Of course, white is probably going to play e5 at some point. It's going to get out the bishops like this, and this is actually a playable position for both sides, I would say. So actually, in my notes, I say computer says black is better. Yeah, I think computer says black is better. I think this position is playable, but I don't think it's going to be very easy for white to pull off a win in this position. It might just be even, or I mean, maybe black is actually better. I said there's lots of black sacrifice ideas. This maybe knight could be on d4 in some point in the future. Yeah, so I would say this is certainly interesting position to look at. Yeah, so that's the knight d6 line. But if you notice, after bishop b6, I have the main line as e takes d4. So in a bunch of previous positions, I showed this, I think, twice, this move e takes d4 in two different sort of variations. And both variations I didn't recommend white played, but I think this variation here is looking more promising. So e takes d4, c takes d4, bishop takes, knight takes. We sacrifice our rook, so we do the exchange sacrifice here. Well, actually, is it an exchange? Let's see, we're giving up a bishop and a rook for a knight and a bishop. So yeah, we are sacking the exchange, but we're also making it like we're going to be able to sacrifice on c3. Most likely the rook's going to be able to sacrifice on d5. So bishop takes g4. So again, this is a common move over here because we want to weaken white's control over this f6 square, and so we could eventually sacrifice on it. H takes g4, rook fe8, and now we do end up taking on d5. Rook takes d5, knight takes c3. So notice that this is a very similar variation. Like we had one variation looked really similar to this, where white was able to actually get like a better position or like a winning position with forcing a sacrifice, and this looks really, really similar. However, there's a key difference. So queen takes c3, king b6, bishop d3, and a5. So actually, there's a lot of intricacies because in the previous variation I showed earlier in the video where it looked really similar to this, white was able to also gain an initiative, but I would say white's b1 bishop is going to be many moves before it can actually move. The queen's going to have to move somewhere, this pawn's going to have to move, black's rooks are in the center. Let's just see the line that I came up with over here. So b4, which is preventing b4 by black. Queen takes b4, rook ed8, queen takes a3, a6, c4, rook d4, c5 check. So in this position, we fork the rook and the pawn. We're trying to create weaknesses in black's structure. So note that actually in this position, white the best play was for black to put all the pawns on the light squares because white has two bishops on the light squares. So normally in like a chess position where black would have all the pieces on the all the pawns on the light squares, then black would have serious weaknesses on dark squares. However, white has two light square bishops over here, so this is playing against white. So after c5 check, white now tries to go and attack the dark squares even though they have two light squared bishops. And actually over here, the engine recommend this bishop. It's like many lines can be played here. This is just like I've followed a lot of engine lines just to show you that this position is really anyone's game. So white tries to infiltrate. They play bishop e4, and in the line that I found, black tries to win the pawn, and actually they sacrifice the rook over here. And in this position, queen d8 check, queen a7, And yeah, in this line, it should be a draw. I mean, I think white has to be very careful because black wants to, of course, take on f6 over here. So far, the queen is defending that as well as the pawn, but like the queen is going to be always restricted, and so in this position, it should just be a draw. And so, yeah, this is basically the mainline theory with the knight e5 variation. So, and yeah, obviously, this whole endgame, like, once we get to this endgame stage, all these moves are not like forced moves. So many different games could happen from here. This is quite an interesting endgame that can occur from what's your decision, custom position. Right. And it shows intricacies because we had like some similar line with all these exact moves: bishop takes g4, rook takes e5, and then taking on c3. And the other variation was winning for white, but this one is anyone's game. So yeah, if we go back a few moves, that's why I thought that this bishop c7 and bishop b6 idea was the only playable idea, or the only, like, at least the best idea for black over here. And it's actually a really, really interesting positional idea for black to counteract white. And yeah, it's super exciting. And of course, this comes after 95 lines, which is just a really nice move. And everything's so beautiful because knight f, that was why knight f3 would be played instead of f3, because when black shuts down white's ideas to take on c3, immediately white has one more try with knight e5. Then even over here with the bishop b6, we had I think it was in this position, yeah, we had knight d6, which is just a super interesting move. I mean, we could take like this and like play a game like this, but I think it was super interesting because we don't need to just take, we can force a draw over here with knight c4 check, and we're sacrificing so much material, but in the end we can get a draw over here. Yeah, so some of the most fascinating theory that you'll see in What's Your Decision. Is just it's truly amazing, stuff. Let me just go back one more time to, if I can find it. Was it this one? 10 d takes e3. Oh, sorry, 11 e takes d4. So this is before this bishop c7, bishop b6 idea. And it was similar to what I just showed you, except in this variation. Oh, sorry, this was the wrong one. It was not here then. It was, no. Where was it? I showed it earlier in the video. If I can't find it because there's so many variations over here, then you just go back in the video. But you know, like the other variation where the rook took on d5 and there's a knight on e4 which took on c3, and then in that position, white was winning. But a few moves later, that same idea with almost all the same moves, but just in a matter of slightly different things in the position, and black's able to hang on in that position. So yeah, truly great theory. In the next video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show the other thing with e3, which is e3 e5, which is a very, very interesting opening as well. And actually, yeah, e3 b5. That's quite an interesting move. So that will be the subject of the next video. And also, after I'm done with these opening theories, I told you I'm playing a correspondence chess tournament with advanced players in this position, and there's some stuff I wanna explore with bishop b5 ideas, which we covered briefly in the last video, and they look very good for black. So I want to cover that more. And there's also other lines where bishop b5 can eventually be played, which also look very good for like a good chance for black. So I'm going to expand more on that later. And also, I plan to do a series on different custom positions I've created as well. So that's everything you can look forward to. I hope you've enjoyed watching this video, and I hope you've learned. It's like really, really fascinating. Some of my favorite theory in this position, knight e5, is just a beautiful move, and the main lines with the bishop c7, bishop b6, that's just something that took like hours of analysis to find this theory, and this is some of my favorite theory in this position. Yeah, I'll see you in the next video. Thanks.